The following is a local resident producer's program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of Oshkosh Media, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everybody, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz, your host, and very pleased to be joined tonight by someone who's been here a number of times over the last 5 years or so, sadly this may be one of his last appearances, although I'm going to try and sneak him in again before he retires. I'm talking about none other than Stan Mack II, the superintendent of the Oshkosh Area School District. And with that, welcome. Thank you for being here.
I'm really pleased to be here. I always look forward to the occasions to have these conversations.
Yeah. Well, sadly though, since we booked this, and we booked this a few weeks back already, and you just announced a week ago that you are retiring.
Well, actually, I announced a bit earlier, but I think the coverage on the newspaper maybe didn't pick it up. But I announced it. It was formally accepted by the board on about the 6th of July, and so we were in the process of beginning transition. But the first transition is really working on selecting a firm to do the superintendent search. But I wanted to give the board for sure about more than 6 months or more to deal with it. Transitions in schools don't come easy in that way, and having at least 6 months, it will probably work out.
Yeah. So my concern is, well, I guess first of all, why leave at the end of the calendar year rather than leaving at the end of the school year?
Well, really family discussions on a number of issues with having children scattered throughout 3 areas far away from Oshkosh, one in suburban Toronto, one in Bismarck, North Dakota, and one to be in Monterey, California. And we as a family had reached the conclusion that we needed to get some more balance in our life. And it seemed to be a reasonable one to approach it from that standpoint. And my comfort level with what I was seeing coming out of the legislature, I wanted to be sure that, and we could have altered this had we needed to face potentially another referendum. I think the district needs the support of and leadership of an experienced person, but when it looked as though we did not need to do so, I thought it would be a comfortable transition so that a new superintendent wouldn't have to be walking into a new referendum and to deal with it from that standpoint. And if we waited till June 30th next year on 18, we potentially could have somebody having to face that issue within 9 months or 6 months of their coming into office.
So here's my concern, and I'm sorry to see you go. You've only been here 5 years, but you're 67 now, and you were 62 when you first took the job. So you've earned retirement at this stage of the game. My concern is, are they, as a board, going to be able to hire someone of quality mid-school year?
I trust that they will, but if they do not feel that comfort level, I have let them know that I will not leave them cold. I will continue to serve until they're comfortable with the replacement. So there is nothing that magically says that, that I'm just going no matter what. No, I care too much about the community, the school district, and care about this board and the school community that if the timing doesn't work out or the pool of candidates doesn't meet their standards, I have offered to them that I'm more than willing to stay on longer if they can't find someone, and if it became, or their best available candidate just wasn't going to free themselves up until next July 1, I will cooperate fully. I care too much about the community and the school district to leave them in a lurch.
Sure.
And I have shed many tears about leaving. Sure. I did a convocation address that a week ago Monday to our entire workforce at Kimball Auditorium, and I had all to do to get through without breaking into full tears, because I'm really attached. And
Sure.
no, if the board's search process is unsuccessful, or if the best identified candidate is first able to come July 1, I've offered the board that I will stay until they're satisfied with the successor. And for me, I'm hoping that we're at the stage with a selection process, and even if that extends after January 1, that the community and the schools deserves a transition time, that I would have several weeks with the new identified superintendent to help them work through that, because I would expect that the district will be hiring somebody with experience such as I had before coming here, but for them to operate, this is not a job for a rookie.
Right. That's right.
It is a job that their careful work is very important to do so, but I am prepared to assist the board in any way, and certainly I will extend my time until there is a candidate that they feel is ready for the job.
Sure.
And that and I, just like when I came to the district, it really needs to be a candidate that should have unanimous support of the board, because that's so critical. But
Sure.
But the worry I have is making sure that we handle a transition so the superintendent has enough time, as I did, to get to know and understand fully both the community internally to the school district as well as externally before they're put it out there on Lake Winnebago by themselves.
Well, and it's a huge process,
Right.
as you know, having
Sure.
gone through it not all that terribly long ago.
Right.
And before you came, we had just a wonderful interim. Betty, and I'm spacing out on her name, maybe you remember it.
Yeah.
But she was, you don't remember it, do
No,
you?
I don't remember. Yes, I've heard,
I could tell by the way you kind of shook your head at me.
I heard about Betty before.
But she
yes.
was just wonderful,
Yes.
and I was in awe about how quickly she got up to speed coming
Right.
in here just on an interim basis.
Right.
I mean, it was amazing. I was so terribly impressed, and she did a great job, filling in until you were
Right,
able to
sure.
get hired and come here and get started.
Well, there was
So-
actually a superintendent for about 2 years in between Betty and I. That's why I did not recall Betty's last name exactly. But so there was another superintendent here, and so that
Really? I don't remember that.
Right? Yes. Yeah. For about 2 years, I believe, and so the
Wow.
interim Betty was I believe came here as a interim and ended up staying as an interim for at least 2 years, if not 3 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
She was here for a
Sure,
while.
sure.
But I sure don't remember anyone
Right. Yes. In between.
else in there.
Yes,
But
and,
in any event, so if you were needed to stay past December 31st,
Well, yes.
is that when your contract ends? Is
Well,
December
my
31st?
contract would end June 30th. If
Okay.
and so,
So-
I'm very comfortable with assisting in any way that the board would desire. But no, I've assured them fully that if they're not successful, or as one of the search, or I think one or both of the search firms interviewed had indicated that they're worried about that December 31st, and what if there were a candidate that was not would not free themselves up until June 30th, but they wanted to hire. I think that would be delightful that we'd have that individual completing their work and wherever it was, but also taking time to spend time with us to make the transition on next July 1 as smooth as possible. But we'll see what happens with the process.
Sure.
I know there are individuals who have contacted me and are interested in the position that would be good, viable candidates. But it's a matter of the right match between the school board and that individual.
And the school board has just voted to hire a company called Ray and Associates as the I don't know if you want to call them a consultant or a search firm or whatever, but they're going to be kind of leading the charge here with a search at a cost of $21,750, and certainly hope it will be money well spent. So, you know, why I say this may be your last appearance, because you know, I'm already booking into November, and this is just the beginning part of September, but you may end up having to stick around
Yeah, if that
a little
happens,
bit longer, and so then we got more flexibility.
Sure.
So if you want to come back, stick around longer.
Sure. Well, that would be some others to decide, but I've already agreed to respond and say yes, I will help as long as we need, because I don't want to have. We have some many good things going now, and I do not want anything to fall flat. For the district. It's
well,
children.
yeah, keep the momentum going.
So
you know.
yeah.
So your next appearance on this show as a farewell will be kind of a fluid date, because we just don't know yet.
But I'm more than willing, and I always appreciate hearing that you're interested in talking.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, and you've always been such a wonderful guest, and you've loved coming on the show.
Sure.
And we never seem to have enough time to get to the various things going on. But, you know, talking about new positions and that kind of thing, the district has a new communications director, and this is a newly created position. Her name is Katie Neiman. And so tell us, because I think some time ago, if I'm remembering it correctly, apparently I'm not remembering everything too well these days, but it seems to me many, many years ago the district had a communications person, then that position was done away with. So what prompted the district now to recreate the position, and what is she going to be doing as communications director?
Yeah, really, she'll be carrying on what quite a number of us have constantly been involved with on a very part-time basis. Kim Brown, Dr. Kim Brown in our offices, who is really is a full-time academic administrator, primarily focusing on elementary, and director of training. She in learning for the district, which is actually her title. She coordinates all the staff development, professional development for all of our teachers, and is actually an Oshkosh native, and through our schools, and had been an elementary teacher and principal, and has worked in the district quite a number of years. In fact, I believe it's either 25 or 26 years. She's been doing it on a part-time basis, and then, as you well are aware, as observed, that when it comes to being directly with the media, I always step forward to deal with that, because many times the community certainly wants to hear directly from the superintendent, and I do WOSH once a month radio, as well as when we have a crisis or an issue in the district, I'm usually the spokesperson for the district. This individual will help us with and direct really all of our work with both publications, as well as all of the social media that is now so prevalent. The old days of simply being a person who puts together maybe once a month or a quarterly newsletter to the community, those are long gone, but there'll be a number of tasks, including that issue of finding every way that today's citizen parent looks forward to, as well as the whole community, because as we have seen kind of the ever thinning of the Oshkosh Northwestern, we feel very forlorn with not getting good coverage, and most of the things that are published in the Northwestern we're supplying there, and we would anticipate that Katie will be doing a fair amount of that. Why did the position come about? It was something that both in our first strategic plan that began in 2013 was suggested, and we needed to get through and getting a little more financial stability to the district, as well as our second strategic plan that began in 2015 and will continue now through 2019, strongly was an advocate for. The Oshkosh for Education group, which is kind of the community watchdog group for that really watches what we're doing and how we work with our public, really came through very strongly and said, you really need a communications director. We would be, I'm sure, the largest, Wisconsin at about 11th largest school district in the state that did not have a communications director. And I have never worked in a district of this size, or even down to 3,000 students, which would be 1/3 or less than 1/3 our size, without a communications person in place. And my former district in suburban Robbinsdale, we had a full-time communications director plus a staff of 3. This person will have no staff, but will be there fully, and she comes to us out of having worked a number of years ago as a communication person, expertise with the Fond du Lac Chamber of Commerce, and for the last several years she's been working with working for a health services company, and came with great reviews, came through a rather extensive interview process. She's actually first starting with us on the first day will be, because she is, again, I respect that greatly, when a person does not walk away from one job but had commitments for her present employer, and so she'll be able to join us on September 19th, and she was appointed back in early in August, and so we're excited to have her. She is really has demonstrated to us through artifacts and her ability to deal with both the written word, but also dealing with technology and design and layout and those things. And when you work in a Chamber of Commerce office that's a dynamic chamber, you end up with a lot of communication obligations, and Katie will be into that third week. We're looking forward to having her on board. She has come to a number of events. Most importantly, she had been also to our total school district convocation a week ago Monday. Was present with being when we presented her appointment to the board, and we look forward and going through all of our new employee orientation. So she's all set to go, except for being freed from her present employee.
Sure. Now, is she going to be 3/4 time?
She's going to be full-time.
Full-time, okay.
Sure.
At what kind of salary?
It's a prorated salary. For this year, it's but it's a starting base salary of $75,000 on a total year basis.
Okay, all right. Okay. That's probably, because she's been around in Fond du Lac area and so forth, that's probably why her name sounded familiar to me, because I thought, why do I know that name? So now that question is cleared up also.
And prorated for this year, with only starting on the 19th, actually, her salary is prorated to about $58,845, running through next June 30th.
Sure. So her salary runs on a calendar year as opposed
12,
to school year to school year.
Fiscal year from July 1. So, but we adjust everything back to what it would be through June 30th of next year.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, I'm certainly, looking forward to working with her, getting her on the show from time to time, along with the new superintendent.
Right. That'll be
so, because they'll both
maybe
be
the two
faces.
of them together. That would be
yes, because they'll both sort of be the faces for the district. And I think that's important. I think it's always good to have a communications director, especially in this day and age, like you mentioned, with all the different social media out there.
Right.
That's a huge responsibility if you're going to do it right. And it's very time consuming.
And we did a rather extensive study. We used a communications expert that had also guided us through appropriate communication through 2 of our referendums, who's really guided a lot of school districts in learning what should be done. And then this consultant interviewed all kinds of community people to see what the community was looking for in the position, and where our shortcomings were. And part of what they discovered regularly is they want to be sure that the superintendent, if I were continuing, or a new superintendent, that it's a partnership. I've discovered through our commercial media that individuals, they are positive about getting written communication and all those kind of things from a communication specialist in the district, but when it comes to an issue of the crisis, they want to hear from the superintendent, the one who's responsible. And I would expect that certainly in my role between now and whenever my last day is here, but for the new superintendent, it's critical that they make themselves available and be comfortable with media. I had opportunity through college to work in college radio, having dealt with Minneapolis-St. Paul news media. I've never been uncomfortable with dealing with the media, and a strong belief that the district's responsibility is constantly, it just gives me shivers when I hear sometimes there was no one available to for us to ask questions, or there was no response, or the district said no comment. That's absolutely a disaster.
It is.
And it is, when you're in public service like we are, it is absolutely our obligation to be prepared to communicate and to be available. And my entire team knows that we have a philosophy that we never say no.
Yeah. Well, and you are so right, Stan, about no comment or no response at press time or at news time or whatever. Those things are public relations killers.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if you're a school district, a city, a county, or a for-profit corporation. You had better have someone at the ready to be able to spell out the company's position on whatever issue it may be, whether it's a chemical spill, whether it's trying to get people out of harm's way with a terrible hurricane, as we've been seeing so much of lately, whatever it may be. And it doesn't have to be something negative that has happened to the organization. It's just, you better have someone there who can be your voice in your face.
Right.
Otherwise, you're dead in the water.
Absolutely. I was advised to be very cautious and not to necessarily do radio when I first came, and or dealing with the newspaper, because as you know, there was a lot of negativity both on the radio as well as the newspaper. And for me, those are two of the connections that I'm most proud of and comfortable with, in the fact that participating with local media is, and with your program, it's to me the ultimate responsibility of the superintendent to do that, and to develop a trusted relationship with the media. And this afternoon I noticed that there were members of the commercial media out here for another event, and most of those reporters and the camera people I've gotten to know over the years, and say hi to them and be available for them, and they know that we always cooperate. And every once in a while, we know it's a slow news day in the Fox Valley and up to Green Bay when Cheryl in my office gets a call, and they say, well, anything happening in the school district that could we talk to Stan about something? We know it's a really slow news day, because if we're not generating it and they're looking for news, but that's a wonderful opportunity then to share positive things as well.
Absolutely.
And we always try to come up with some event or some activity that's going on that we can share or celebrate, and making sure that not only our local community but the greater Fox Valley and Green Bay community are aware of, and for us to celebrate.
Sure. Well, one event that's coming up later this month, and I want to talk about it later, but it's Project Curb.
Yes.
So we're definitely going to touch on that. But before we get to that, this is just the start of the school year. We're taping this on the 7th of September. School,
We had 3 whole days in.
Yeah, 3 whole days. And, I know that that's not a whole lot of time to really give an impression or to form one, but how do you see things having gone so far?
We were starting last weekend with probably the best news we've had on being with a couple of positions. About Tuesday a week ago, we were down to having only about 3 or 4 teaching positions that we've been able to find staff for, including halftime music, a full-time kindergarten teacher, a few others that were, because they were last-minute resignations, where persons were going elsewhere. But we started off the year as fully staffed as we have in the past 6 years now, and this being the start of the 6th year. And we being in a position that that we had numerous other paraprofessional positions, but they don't require the specific license we need to go through with licensed teachers. But we're off to a good start with that. We did a shift this year with we had our Human Resources Director and Dr. Brown, Kim Brown, work with us on developing with our principals a new schedule to better deploy and better use our elementary specialist, we call it the ABC schedule, where they rotate around our specialist in art, Phi-Ed, and music. In most cases only need to now go to 2 schools. They have a constancy of schedule, and for the first time, which I'm delighted, we've increased removed the requirement that a third Phi-Ed experience during the week had to be taught by an elementary teacher, of course. That would be an additional assignment for them that they needed to do, and we've been able to free that up so that all Phi-Ed elementary Phi-Ed are taught by elementary Phi-Ed specialists, music specialist, and art specialist. And we stabilize, as I've always worried about, is it's such a waste when we have, I call it windshield time, when we have elementary, because we do have on average small elementary schools, we have the windshield time driving between schools. Well, we're not teaching a single child when we have a teacher in a car. Right. And so that is a positive beginning, and getting that schedule to work is critical. And but the whole atmosphere, I noticed it at our opening breakfast. We have a little continental breakfast, and then convocation in Kimball Auditorium. The whole voice level and the positive engagement, staff coming back, so they were positive a week ago Monday, and with the excitement of having students this past Tuesday starting, we're off to a good start. We have, as usual, we have some nightmares and mistakes with the first week or so, and maybe first 2 weeks with school busing, but and that affects a small number, because we're kind of fortunate because of all of our neighborhood schools and where our schools are located. We really only bus about 3,000 of our 9,800 students, and when you're only busing that number, but for the families that are involved in busing, it's serious business. And thank goodness we've had moderate temperatures, decent weather, but we are constantly with last-minute changes and people moving. It's just amazing how bus schedules can get messed up. And we're working
so
with
have
the bus
they
company.
been messed up already so far?
They were messed up from day one, and they continue to be, and we're working on recovery. And but it's a small number of errors, but for the families affected, it's serious business, and we take that very seriously, and we're working with them.
Now, you know, talking about busing, I mean, I saw even on national news this past summer that school districts around the country or private busing companies, because you guys use Cobeson, you don't hire bus drivers yourselves, you employ the company and they hire drivers, but there were drivers being needed all over the country for school districts. Does that factor into this problem at all right
Somewhat,
now?
Yeah. It in high unemployment, when such as 5-6 years ago, the overall number of people who step forward and will drive bus are it's a far better population to choose from, and in low unemployment like we have today, it's a much harder job to fill every bus driver, and the qualifications are there. So it's we can I could tell you that from my Minnesota experience, where we owned our own buses and did the busing, that the quality, whether you're a private contractor or you're a publicly held bus company, that the quality of who you have available to work for you adjusts, because bus driving is a very tough. I've been teased a number of times about being recruited for being a bus driver, but our food service department thinks I should drive one of their vans carrying food between the two high schools and the elementary. So I've got more job offers than I could ever fill. But filling a bus driving position is very difficult.
Sure.
It takes not only the driving skills but the patience of dealing with it, and then until bus drivers get used to exactly the route, and but it's patience with the children they're serving, but being able to listen, to understand the expectations of the safety in driving.
Sure.
And we have from a safety standpoint, Cobussen has a full-time safety specialist that works with them. From a safety standpoint, we've been in an excellent position. I can guarantee you that the rare occasions when we have a bus accident, it is somebody's car slamming into not stopping or bumping into a bus. And passenger cars always lose on buses.
That's right.
But no, the supply is a very, and when you think about maybe having 3 hours of work in the morning, and with kindergarten now being all-day kindergarten, so we really don't, with the exception of 4K, our 4-year-old program before kindergarten, there's not noontime busing except for those tiniest ones. And then to come back and starting at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then doing 2 routes. It's one for elementary and then our middle school, high school routes. It's hard work and it's a hard job, but it is also it's not like having a full-time 40-hour week job.
Sure.
And so I'm empathetic with it, but it's an issue of making sure that the schedules work, that they work out the time frame, and we attempt to get out the week before school by postcard and mailings to every family, so that they know their approximate time when the bus should arrive by their neighborhood. Because, and I always remind individuals that we run a bus service, not a taxi service. And it's not a taxi service. It's a whole different thing where it's a door-to-door operation. But
Right.
But a bus service is having X amount of walking to the bus corner, and then dealing with a large number of students on the bus. But overall, I was at South Park on middle school on the first day afternoon, and we in fact had about 4 students who by 4, now dismissal is about roughly 3:30. It was 4:15, and we worked with families on picking up 2 of their children, and our director of special education, not the special ed students but regular ed students, took one other teacher with her and drove 2 students home out into the country. We made sure that every student got home, and
Wonderful.
And the safety of that. But busing is one of those auxiliary services with schools that have little or nothing to do with learning, but when it doesn't work well, especially in the morning, it affects learning.
Of course,
And that's critical to
Certainly.
success.
Want to talk about a couple of things here, and we don't have to, get into a big, long discussion about it, but we were talking before about the communications person, and you had referenced hearing back from citizens and so forth. Does the school district typically send out surveys to people in the community, not just at referendum time when all the political stuff comes, but just on an average basis, 1 or 2 times a year?
Yeah, it's highly dependent upon the school and trying to collect information from on how this
So it
particular
only goes
program-
out to people who have kids in the schools.
Kids in the school. And
See, I think that's wrong, Stan, because I'm a taxpayer. I don't have kids in the school, but through my property taxes, I pay to support the schools.
Right.
I pay part of your salary,
Right.
and so forth. I think the community at large should be sought out for their opinions.
Right. And I think that will be one of the additional responsibilities of the communications person to get that kind of information. We haven't had the staff to do that, and in this day and age, with technology as it is, being able to collect that data, it has been working quite well. Every other year, as a part of not just the referendum issue, we've had another set of questions that we've asked on reflection about what attitudes towards the school district were and what the perceptions were. And I can tell you that in each of those surveys, we've ended up with the public rating us higher than the Delta Kaplan National, the Kaplan National Survey that surveys schools every year, but giving us a B plus, A minus, but generally a B plus on how we're doing. And much of that is really a reflection, and that went to the total public, and that gives us a sense of how does the public perceive us, but also we're dealing with a public that, because we haven't done a good job of communicating with them about all the details, and we've lost the more intense coverage that Northwestern used to provide, and that people used to read, and the subscribership is so down that we're talking to a public that is underinformed about the operation of schools, and so it's a two-sided. So we're kind of asking people about things we haven't told them about, nor have we taught them.
Right. Well, I, for one, look forward to press releases from the district.
Sure.
I find them informative, and those of us who do get them, I think we try to get that information disseminated to our viewers, our readers, our listeners, whatever the case may be. But I always look forward to more information and hearing more about what you guys are doing. And one of the things I appreciate so much about the city of Oshkosh in recent years, the city being the governmental body, not the, the walls that determine our city boundaries. But what I appreciate that the city has done is they have reached out constantly with surveys, and now granted they have water bills that they can send those surveys out in. You don't have that option, but they also put it online, and so you can answer your survey questions online, and I'm hoping to see something like that coming from the district, because those of us who don't have kids, we still have good ideas, and want to offer up our input, and should have that opportunity.
And adding this staff position, which is to serve the entire community, not just the parents of children we serve in the district, but the whole broad community, which is certainly approaching 80,000, because if you include 80 to 90,000, because if you include all of the rural areas, not just the city of Oshkosh, but all of the school district, it's critical that we have that opportunity. And I think I would have loved in my time in the district to have more data collected in that way about what individuals think, as well as for us to be able to, the first job is really to communicate why we do what we do. Because we're a highly regulated institution, between what direction we get from Washington or get from Madison. The regulations that we do, people will ask us sometimes, well, why are you doing that? Well, because there's a law or regulation that tells us we must do that. And I think we have to use that as an opportunity to share and to teach, because if people don't know why we're doing it, the speculation that goes on in coffee shops or in bars or very different places where people talk about what's going on in the community is based on the suspicion that we may be doing things that we shouldn't have to be doing, and yet I would venture to say that 95% of the things we do, there's a law or mandate behind it that tells us we must have to
sometimes
do
an unfunded mandate, but still a mandate.
A lot of times unfunded mandate. So.
One of the things I appreciate about the Oshkosh Area School District, not only because I'm a graduate of the district, being a native of Oshkosh, but is the fact that we don't seem to have some of the problems with violence in the schools that we have seen recently in other schools. For those who are not local, we had a situation in the Green Bay School District this past summer where a teacher actually resigned her position at a school board meeting because the kids in her middle school were so violent. I mean, they were beating teachers up, and I think I'd heard too that one of them was, or some were setting a fire in the school itself. Whatever the case may be, and maybe I'm thinking of another district there, but it was horrible enough that she felt the need to resign her position. And then it was just a couple weeks ago, this made national news where a student in the Milwaukee Public School District was literally punching a teacher and, I mean, just pummeling this poor guy. And, you know, we may not have a perfect school system, but I don't think we have things that rise to that level. And what do you think the district is doing, Stan, that keeps it that way?
Well, we have, first of all, great teachers and good administrators who tackle those issues and who are dealing with it, because it isn't that those things don't sometimes happen. It is how they handle it and respond to it, and make sure that things are quelled when it occurs. We have not had individuals attack our employees, but we have our employees engaging when students have so many times it's disagreements that occur. I think the worst time during the school year is you know, February, March, when things are and spring break is not right away coming, and people are having a little cabin fever or whatever, and we often inherit. And as we've seen in the city of Oshkosh, some of the and our relatively new police chief, I think I served on the committee that interviewed candidates for the position, and I worry about him sometimes because Oshkosh has more things happen than I think he maybe was thinking about in the general community. Well, some of those things that evolve in the community on a Monday morning at school, because there's been a disagreement between families or between individuals on the weekend, we inherit those into school on Monday morning or sometime during the week, and those conflicts arise, and students plan to get at each other, not attack our staff, but our staff have been occasionally injured when they're stepping in to stop it, but control it, and none of our teaching staff or paraprofessionals or principals ever hesitate in stepping forward and to intervening and to not let things get out of control. And then we have a strict discipline policy that is enforced, and that Dr. Andrew Jones, the executive director of administrative services, who supervises the principals, one of his, in addition to supervising and evaluating the principals, he hears all of those cases where discipline has exceeded what is acceptable in the building, and he ends up with hearing those cases in pre-expulsion, and then a handful of those after he reviews them sometimes go to the board for full expulsion. But we take that very seriously to maintain safe schools. It isn't that it doesn't happen, but I credit our teachers, our principals, and our paraprofessionals who are not hesitant about when someone's being hurt or potentially hurt or injured to step into the melee and deal with that. In addition, we have an absolutely fabulous police department who, with our resource officers that are in our schools, who step in and are true heroes for both our students, number one, because students feel safe because they're there.
Sure. Secondly,
because they also know that primarily our teaching staff and our principals step forward and maintain a safe environment. And the other issue that has been, we're one of the strongest schools with discipline being held lower because of PBIS, which is positive behavior intervention, where we work with teachers, paraprofessionals. We've even done it, and it's been carried over to the public library. We've done it for bus drivers, where we teach individuals how to respond before anything evolves by effectively having adults reinforce positive behavior in neutral times, that students are reminded constantly of, I just noticed that Dr. Herzog was recently at one of our positive behavior intervention celebrations. She saw across the room, and one of the motivations was that one of our local sandwich groups was invited in to throw small sandwiches from a basket into the audience as just kind of rewards, and certainly there wasn't enough for every child, but this young man was sitting was at in South Park Middle School, and this young man was sitting among a whole bunch of fellow students, and he caught one of those sandwiches, and he looked at the young lady, a little a Hmong child next to him who missed getting it, turned and handed her the sandwich that he caught.
Very nice.
Classic example. And Dr. Herzog saw that happen and mentioned to the teacher to one of the teachers who knew that, and she helped identify the student that was positive behavior. And they have these reward certificates that students can accumulate for special privileges and special gifts. And that's a big time example of the positive things of when you see students doing appropriate things, behaving well, answering questions, handling, passing in the hall in an appropriate way. Teachers and administrators and paras are equipped to pass out these notes, and it's amazing how we see a change in behavior, and different levels have different motivations. High school is, of course, the hardest because some of the things that we can do with primary children would be, sure, they'd roll their eyes at high school level. But positive behavior intervention helps, but strong enforcement also helps.
Okay, excellent. Got so many questions yet, and quickly running out of time here, and I want to make sure that we get to as much of this as we can. I know that the third week in September is when final enrollment numbers kind of come out, but how do things look from a funding standpoint thus far?
Right. Yeah, I'm watching every day, and I understand that joint finance has passed and it's in the committee, and next week we should, 2 months late, but we should be getting the finance, the draft of what I have read and what we've analyzed puts us in a position that the cumulative new revenue to the district could be as much between $2.4 and $2.5 million. It's the largest amount of potential increase the district has had since I've been in the state of Wisconsin. That's why I'm comfortable with the fact that the district should not be in a position to, for the first time in a number of years, in an even numbered year, 2018, not have to be looking at an operating referendum, because the legislature, not just from our district, but from districts across the state, several hundred referendums have passed in different districts, including 2 in the last 5 years in our district, as a result of zero or negative funding to schools. The governor, and it started with the governor giving positive news on suggesting $200 per student in the first year of the biennium, and $204 the second year, plus some adjustment in our levy cap that will help us. One generates a little under $2 million, and another fund, or portion of the bill, will generate another about $450,000 in revenue. And then there's a strange piece that as you know, in fact, this year we're deploying now to 3rd grade through 5th grade computers to be used in school, but every child has a computer to work from 3rd grade on through 5th grade. Last year we did middle previous year we did high school. And part of this legislation package that appears to be passing will allow for $125 for districts to invest in a technology computer for every 9th grade student. Well, we've already done that, so we expect we're still going to get that and just offset what we invested.
Sure.
So the news is positive and good. And when the legislature next week hopefully passes it, and I have every reason to believe that the governor will sign this bill, it's the best news that we've had since before Act 10.
Okay, very good. And God knows we can use that.
Right.
Last December, the board approved spending $186,000 to assess the conditions of the various buildings in the district.
Right.
And that report is now available.
Right.
And folks, if they want to see it, you can go online, and it's there. It's interestingly enough broken down. Yeah, you can look at it school by school,
Right.
or there's a huge compilation of it that is over 500 pages.
Right.
But it is a very in-depth report, certainly much more in-depth than we have time for.
Right.
But just, in a few paragraphs, can you just kind of tell me what basically the report says?
Right. It outlines for every school, both especially all of the nooks and crannies of issues of a school that has an average age of a facility of approaching 80 years, and the
And
things
that's many of ours.
And that's many. Yeah, if the average age of our schools is 80 years old, and that includes just a now 4-year going on to 4-year-old Oak Lawn, and the double the size of Lakeside, and all the rest are in those ages and going back to the 1800s for Reed and Smith and those schools. That buried within those buildings are pieces and parts, especially of mechanical, plumbing, things that haven't been tackled, and there simply hasn't been resources to deal with it. What we really need our next step is to outline from that list what are the most serious issues, and of a repair, and should we take a look at what combination is there? There definitely is. Just like human beings and animals and everyone, there is a life expectancy. And in this case, it provides us with all of the health signs or the lack of health signs for every building to tell us how long should we potentially expect, or how much health care, how much building investment should we invest in the individual, and in the individual building, and in what time frame should we respond to it. So our next step is now to sit down and map out, and I'm going to be a party to that this fall, is mapping out the priorities of what we should identify as neediest schools, and then should we look at other alternatives for them? Clearly the Traegers and the Tipplers and the Oak Lawns and Oakwoods, and there are a number of those buildings that there have been significant investment in. What we've done with about $50 million over the last 5 years that I've been a party to it is invested in the heating, ventilation, air conditioning, where only 1/3 of our schools are air conditioned, but invested so that if we ever get to having 20 below days again, that we don't have to be shutting down schools because the boiler went out.
Right.
Every one of our schools are well equipped. So it's really a priority list, working through that, and then it's the most comprehensive work that's ever been done on analyzing all of our buildings. The one limitation that it doesn't have, that no one should assume was included in that, is separate from that, is we recognize that education has changed a lot in the last 50 years, and remembering the age of our 2 high schools, which I have the greatest worry about, not because of their structure, but because their science labs, all of their are most aged, and in today's STEM economy of expecting that that we are preparing our students well in science and mathematics and engineering and all of those things, those spaces are the same as they were in the 1960s, or in North's case in 1971 when it was opened. And those are facilities that desperately need attention, and that's a whole academic improvement issue. But
sure.
you don't want to invest in those technology, or improving the instructional spaces, until you know that the building around it is is not just on life support.
Right, right. So talking about buildings and so forth, that leads us to Project CURB, and CURB is spelt all in caps, C-U-R-B. Is that an acronym for something?
Is Project CURB? It is, yes, and I'm not remembering the acronym exactly.
That's fair.
My apologies to Beth Wyman, who could quote it to you exactly. But
tell us about it
But
anyway.
it is, it is really driven from CURB appeal, looking at the outside of our buildings, and that the improvements of how we have maintained, we've taken care of the operational insides of our buildings, but as Beth and everyone involved with O4E and many community people have come to say, you know, you're outside of your buildings, because our priorities have been on instruction inside. The yards of schools and the spaces of schools and the shrubbery and the trees and things look terrible on the outside of schools, and the whole aspect of dealing with this coming event is to identify and improve the exterior of every school in the community, and to get that when people drive by, just like in selling homes, CURB appeal, to identify project of the community, and we've had tremendous amount of donations from lots of people in the community, both of in-kind services as well as the issue of being able to provide new equipment on the school properties. One of the things that, and then I'll speak to the issue of that is making sure that we have either kickball, baseball, or softball fields improved and returned to every one of our schools. The other is we have a community citizen who has looked around the community and say, you know, when I drive by our schools, I don't necessarily know that they're part of the Oshkosh Area School District. And one of the requests is to improve the signage that celebrates the fact that this school, X, Y, or Z, is a part of the greater community, greater Oshkosh Area School District, and making
Very
sure
important.
that's there. And but we're looking forward to Saturday, the 23rd of
Yep, I just looked it up. It is a Saturday,
Right, Saturday morning.
September 23rd, Saturday. And from when to when during the day,
I
Stan?
believe people will start before 8, but 8 till noon.
Okay.
The goal was that if we have an event on Saturday, that everybody would go home for lunch and they wouldn't come back. So the goal was to have that work done, and to have it organized in almost kind of, we would hopefully not call it a mob action, but a large group action, so that many hands make light work is the theory behind that. And I learned that in German first, but the issue is that we have been seeking and selecting, and online there is with the Project CURB, there's a sign up for individuals who want to participate, and we've had such wonderful community turnout. But in all of this, and the driving force behind all of this has been Beth Wyman, who took that on, because the feedback Oshkosh for Education had and community surveys said, you know, you may be well and good in your school buildings, but the outside of your buildings look very shoddy, and we should apologize for that, but the priority has been to put the dollars into educating children and taking care so that they're safe schools along the way.
Well, sure, but you know what? I think that people in the public, if they're able to and they want to participate in something like that, I think that's a great thing. It's just like, you know, as you're driving down highways, you'll see sections of highways that are, you know, cleaned up and cared for from a aesthetic standpoint by different companies. My father was part of the telephone pioneers that took care of so many different sections of highway. And, you know, this is really the same thing. If they go to the Oshkosh Area School District's website, they can sign up for this.
Or directly to Project Curb, but the website of the district is will get you there because it's featured as a hotkey to move into to learn more about that.
All right. So if we can just pull up the district's website one more time quickly so that folks can take it and put it on a pad of paper or just go directly to it. It's not coming up, but just all you have to do is Google search or a Bing search, whatever your search engine is, just type in Oshkosh Area School District and it will come up. And then you can go to it right from there. So
we should know one other thing that is really in place. We don't
have any time.
Oh, well,
just tell me real quickly, quickly.
600 security cameras mounted and connected to a central source for review that was part of the last referendum, and that project under Dr. Gunlick's direction has been completed and is into place, and we have monitoring going on in every school and security, and it really is a helpful deterrent because the reality is we'll still capture inappropriate behavior at varying times, but the whole goal is to be a preventative that hopefully with signs on every door to remind people that you're presently being videoed.
You're on camera.
You're on
Smile.
Camera, smile. Major task this summer.
Yes, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's always interesting and a pleasure for me. So I really hope that we'll have an opportunity to chat again before you leave. If nothing more than a look back at Stan Mack II's career here in the Oshkosh Area School District. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And we will talk to you again.
Sure.
That date's going to be fluid, but we'll have you back on.
I will honor whatever the board requests.
All right, excellent. That's going to do it for us. Thanks to Stan. Thank you to the crew, which tonight is just one. And as always, thanks to you. We'll see you again. Take care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.